Hey guys, good evening. This is Brad with Ball Down South Sports Wave. Tonight we are going to do our Pick Six and No Fly Zone segment show. And as always, I've got John Hammonds with me. How are you, John?
I'm doing good, man.
You ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right. We do have someone else with us tonight. We have Drink Local BHAM, John Roberts, with us as a guest tonight, and he's going to join us. Are you on?
I am.
All right. Are you ready for this?
I am.
All right. So we're going to start with our pick six tonight. And this week's topic is going to be Heisman, our top six Heisman front runners. So I guess what we'll do is kind of do a round table, maybe do two, and then you do two, and then I do two, and then kind of go around maybe. Does that sound all right, guys?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
All right. So John, we'll start with you. Hammonds, we'll start with you. You want to give us your number one and number two, or you want to give us number five and number six?
I'll give you five and number six. Five is Will Anderson, and I'm gonna go on a limb for six and put Jalen Daniels in there, quarterback for Kansas.
All right.
That's my surprise pick. Other than that,
Are you got anything that stats wise or anything that he's doing that you're wanting to kind of
yeah,
back that up with?
he's got 890 pass yards. He's got 320 rush yards with 15 total touchdowns. He's only got one interception, and his quarterback rating is 98 plus.
Right.
So he's had a pretty decent
And they've
season.
started out 4-0, so that helps.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Drink Local BM, what do you got for five and six?
Let's see. I have Stetson Bennett.
Stetson Bennett at number five?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a career thing for him. But that's a number five. I don't know if he's going to put the numbers up total at the end of the year, but he's looking a lot better this year than he did last year. Last year he was more of a kind of plug in, and you don't really know if he's going to be the guy. Everybody kept doubting him as the guy. Well, this year he's the guy, and being the quarterback on the number one team in the nation, that kind of puts you in there anyway. So
Right. So who do you have at number six?
six, I was kind of looking at between the Kansas quarterback and the Oklahoma quarterback. So y'all had talked about, I believe, Jalen Daniels.
Yeah, he's
But
the
we can
Kansas
throw in there
quarterback.
Oklahoma quarterback Dylan Gabriel.
Right.
Kind
You
of getting
know,
in there.
people kind of thought this past week, Oklahoma fans were saying he missed some throws and stuff. But if you look at his numbers from last week, I mean, it was still pretty impressive.
Right, and like I said, he's still hanging around on that, and we'll see how he ends up doing the rest of the year. But that's what I've got right now at number six.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you two names here at the end of my list that I think most people wouldn't have. I'm going to go with Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. So far, he is having just a stellar season. He leads the nation in yards. He leads the Pac-10 in just about every single category. Yards, completion percentage, um, touchdowns. He is, having a heck of a year, and Washington is, having a great season as well. So I'm going to go with him. And then I'm going to put somebody in there at number 6 that I know that nobody will say. And it's simply because he doesn't play a position that most people would think about. But I'm going to put Brock Bowers in there. And I know Brock Bowers probably has no shot just because of the perception. But in my opinion, I think that's the whole reason he should have a shot, is because he plays a position that nobody even thinks about, and he plays it. I mean, he is spectacular, game in and game out, every single week. I mean, he's got 126 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I mean, catching bombs, running down the field, running over people. Brock Bowers is definitely one of the top 5 or 6 um, players in college football, in my opinion. What do you guys think about that?
Well, what he does have is he has um, the help that Devonta Smith won the Heisman a couple of years ago. So even though he may still be listed as maybe a tight end and not necessarily a receiver, but he's used as a receiver much more than a tight end. And since Devonta Smith won it as a receiver, there is that possibility, or at least something in his favor that will help out. And then, of course, again, being somebody that's on the number 1 team in the nation definitely will get you some looks.
Right, but most people think of him as a tight end, and most people are not going to think a tight end's going to win the Heisman.
Well, right. But I mean, do you think that, when you're looking at the old, I mean, tight ends now, like Gronkowski, or, well, he's now in the past, but,
Right.
Gronkowski, getting, like a Tunzel, what's the guy that's with the 49ers? I think he's been sitting out, but I mean, a lot of them
Yeah, I
tight
can.
ends are doing really well in the NFL and
Right.
being very much that hybrid. And it kind of really started with Gonzalez with the Kansas City Chiefs, and then it kind of moved into who was it that was wanting to be paid as like a wide receiver that was a tight end for I believe it was the uh, Seahawks. I can't remember who it was right off the top of my head, but there was one of them that was pushing to be paid like one.
Right.
And so now that you're starting to see, a lot of these tight ends be treated, or they're kind of coming around to being treated much more like just wide receivers, that you may start seeing it. It's still a ways away from being kind of represented the way you think it's going to be, but I mean, you may be onto something.
I'm just saying, I think he's definitely one of the top 5, 6, 7 players in college football, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hammonds, who you got for 3 and 4?
3 and 4. I'm going to go a different route here. I got Caleb Williams at 4, and at 3, I got Bryce Young. I just think the two that I have coming up have just played a little bit better. Bryce Young had that little hiccup against Texas, which he led the game winning drive too, but he didn't play the best. I think he inflated his stats this weekend against a pretty bad Vanderbilt team, which, I mean, that's fine and good and all, but I feel like he needs to show me a little bit more going forward, especially possibly this weekend with Arkansas. So I got Bryce Young and Caleb Williams at 3 and 4.
All right. John Roberts, how about you?
So I've got Hinden Hooker in there at 4 and Caleb at 3.
All right. Hinden Hooker's a different name. Nobody's brought his name up yet.
I mean, he's he has been, I guess, rounding into a very good quarterback, being a dual threat guy. So we'll get just as many yards on the ground as he's able to throw. And then again, the fact that he is just a lot better passer now, and that Tennessee team is just is starting to kick it on all four gears here. So
They are. I agree with you. And in my 4 spot, I also have Hinden Hooker as well. I think Hinden Hooker is on the rise right now. Now, I will say Tennessee has a fairly tough schedule over the next 4 or 5 games. And we'll see if Hinden Hooker can keep them winning. And, I mean, you can probably drop 1 game, but you can't drop 2 or 3 probably and still stay in the Heisman race, more than likely. So I'll keep him at 4, and then I'm going to go Bryce Young at 3. Bryce Young's the defending Heisman winner, so he's got to be in there. He's still having a good year. They coming off of a 55-3 pounding, I think, of Vanderbilt. So, kind of padding those numbers last week.
right.
Right. John, who you got at number 2?
Number 2 is Hinden Hooker. He had Saturday, he passed for 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, I think 112 rushing yards. The biggest thing with Hooker is he's 81 of 113 for 1,193 yards and 8 touchdowns and just 1 interception. And that's hard to overlook, going into, week 5 it is. That Tennessee's got a bye week, then they play LSU next Saturday. So he's in the hunt for the Heisman. Right now I think he belongs. Beating a team that, he's been haunted by for the Tennessee team's been haunted by for many years. Florida was a big knock in the old Heisman boot. So I feel like he's right there at number 2, and number 1 is C.J. Stroud. It wasn't his best performance, but he did have a 5 touchdown effort against a pretty decent Badgers team in the past, but they wasn't real good Saturday night. So, but that's my 1 and that's my 2. So,
All right. Drink Local BM, what do you got? Number 2.
I got C.J. Stroud at number 2.
C.J. Stroud at 2?
Yep, C.J.
All right.
Stroud at 2, for all the reasons that you said there, John. But at 1, I'm going Bryce, and the reason why is because he is the king. He's at the top of the mountain right now, and yes, he is the defending Heisman Trophy winner. And while you guys are talking about padding stats against Vanderbilt's still an SEC team. We saw earlier that they seem to be a better Vanderbilt team than what we've seen in years past as far as the first couple games of the season. And you got to think that with the new wide receivers that Bryce has had, it's going to take him a minute to get comfortable with each one of them. And, you can see that with, say, in the NFL, just looking at what, say an Aaron Rodgers, somebody that's really good, week 1, he's getting used to his wide receivers, and what happened to them? They got beat, right?
Right.
So in week 2 and week 3, he's starting to get comfortable, because now he's throwing to at least one of the rookies quite often, and he is throwing to some of the new guys also fairly often. So what we saw with Vanderbilt, not only was it padding stats, but it was he's starting to get comfortable with some of these wide receivers. And I think that with Arkansas coming up and some of the tougher games coming up, you're going to see that his comfortability with these wide receivers, he's going to start going off on even better teams.
Well, he certainly has a couple of big games coming up this week and next week. So He definitely has the chance to separate himself from the pack a little bit over the next couple of weeks if he plays well.
Now, I might have misspoke on that. I think Hinden Hooker has 0 interceptions. I think I said he had 1, didn't I?
I
I
don't
can't. I
remember.
can't remember. I
I don't
think,
remember, John.
but he's got 0, I believe. Yeah. So
I mean,
that's.
I was really just going to go with the Auburn quarterback staff as the number one. Just I feel like that they're just the best, you know.
Yeah.
So my number 2, I'm going to go with Caleb Williams. He started out really well. Last week there was a little bit of struggle there, Oregon State, but he did drive them down and had the game-winning touchdown to Addison to beat Oregon State at their house late in the game last week. So I'm going to go. My number 2 is Caleb Williams, and I'm going C.J. Stroud as number 1. For all the reasons that you guys said, I will say this. In my list, I left out Stetson Bennett, but I put Brock Bowers in there kind of in his place because I just feel like Brock Bowers needs to have a little limelight. He doesn't play the quarterback position, and all of these guys that we're talking about are quarterbacks except for Will Anderson, which was one of John's picks, but everybody else is a quarterback.
Well, the biggest thing with Bryce that I had was he had that 2 interception game against Louisiana Monroe, and I'm not saying that's going to hurt him, but he struggled at times against Texas, and then he had those 2 interceptions. But like you said, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's getting accustomed to these new receivers that he's got, and he can really make a stand this weekend when he plays Alabama or when he plays Arkansas which is a huge road game for Alabama, and get a marquee win on the road. And I think once he gets comfortable with these receivers, I think you'll see Bryce Young get more comfortable.
Yeah, and I really think that what he's going to be judged on, and what he'll be judged on is how he fares in the SEC and how he fares in the big games and stuff like that. So at Texas, you can actually almost forgive Texas because that's, road environment that early in the season that was just extremely hostile. And you led the game winning drive. You were the guy that escaped getting sacked and was able to get through and lead the game winning drive for the team. So I think that what they'll end up seeing is what happens later in the season when he goes up against the defenses of the SEC, like going against Arkansas. And I think he actually might do really well against Arkansas if they're still missing their cornerbacks. So I think he could pick that team apart. And, going forward, so we'll see what he does against some of the other teams of the SEC.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, it's still early in the season. This is, through week 4, and this is just a topic I thought we would hit. We might revisit this later in the year, so, and maybe actually pick who we think will win. So, but that's probably what we'll do a little later in the year. So our next segment we're going to go into is called No Fly Zone. This is where we do some topics, and we kind of discuss for a little bit, and then we tell whether or not we think it should fly or no fly. So our first topic is going to be Kansas. So Kansas is 4-0, has shocked a lot of people. Jalen Daniels, their quarterback, has played really, really well. And this past week had a really stellar game. It was against Duke. I'm not going to say that it was a top-notch team. Duke was 3-0, but there's been some buzz this week that because Kansas is leading the Big 12, that they should be ranked in the top 15 or 20. And kind of throw away early season expectations and just go on what they've done the past 4 games. Are you guys on board with them being ranked that high?
I am. You know, they whipped Houston on the road. They beat a solid, decent West Virginia team on the road. They beat Tennessee Tech, which ain't real good, but they come back and beat a decent Duke team. And, they're averaging, I think, 47 points a game. At some point, you have to look and say, this is a brand issue. I feel like when you're a smaller brand, people don't take notice. Now, if this was an SEC team, they'd be in the top 25.
They were left out. They were left out of the top 25 this week, and I thought maybe they might crawl in towards the back end of the top 25, but they didn't. So, but there's been a whole lot of buzz that people are saying, well, they should be ranked where Ole Miss is, or in the top 15 or whatever.
Yeah, and it's their best season, I think, in 13 years. It just don't make no sense to me. And, and both of their next games are against Iowa State and TCU, which are very winnable. And if these voters don't put Kansas in, if they win those two, which they should, I just think you should get rid of the AP poll, to be honest. Because these kids deserve a little credit. Their defense ain't really good, but their offense is absolutely hard to defend against. Jalen Daniels, we just talked about him. I think he's throwing for over 800 yards, and their running game's really good. They got some really good receivers. So Lance Leopold, he's already getting looks at other coaching jobs. So, he's done a heck of a job at Kansas to get them in the position that they are. And that goes without saying. Yes, I think this flies.
Okay.
I think Kansas deserves to be ranked, and I think they deserve to be show some recognition. But like I said, if this was a team like Vanderbilt or a bigger brand, I think, even in the SEC being Vanderbilt, I think they would get ranked.
Well, man, if Vanderbilt was 3-1 and they go and beat Alabama last week, they're probably ranked.
Yeah, it's based on. I feel like a lot of times it's based on where you're at and what conference you're in. That's just my opinion, though.
I'm not going to say that they're not, because Vandy, if they go and beat Alabama last weekend and they're 4-1, they're probably ranked.
They are.
John Roberts, are you going to fly with this or no fly? Do you think they should be ranked in the top 15 or 20?
I think so. Especially in the top 20, I think they should definitely be ranked in the top 20 with what they've done so far, because the ranking should be, what have you done for us this year? Not what have you done in the last decade. It should be, what have you done in this year? The rankings should count for this year.
Right,
and
but there is such a thing as expectations for this year.
And they're exceeding them.
Right, but but early on, the expectations wasn't that Kansas would be setting 4-0.
Well, we're not also sitting here going are the rankings supposed to be a projection of where they are going, where you think they're going to end, or what they are right now? Because if what they are right now is a top 20 team, but what they might be later on, I don't think their defense is good enough to stay.
Right.
But I think that they're good enough to be there right now.
Right now.
Yeah. So I think that's what it is. So I think it flies if we're talking about right now. We're talking about right now that it flies.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you.
So,
and here's my thing with it. And the rankings have always kind of went this way and been that way, in my opinion, especially with schools who don't really have the reputation.
Right.
They usually, you have to more than earn your stripes to kind of get the recognition.
I mean, that's what
you deserve.
What we had to deal with the SEC in the early 2000s. So LSU wins a shared national title in 2003. I believe Tennessee had won theirs in '98, but I think you had Florida in the top, but you didn't really have a ton of teams until you get Auburn that gets left out, and you get Mike Slive that's out there pounding the drum for a +1 or basically a 14 playoff. Well, 2005, it's Texas and USC, but 06, Florida's right back in it. 7, LSU with 2 losses gets in there because they're in the SEC, because the SEC is now starting to prove themselves. And then 08, Florida's back. 9, it's Bama. 10, it's Auburn. 11, 12, Bama. And so on and so forth. And now, I mean, there's not going to be a time where really an SEC team gets left out. When we get into the 12-team playoff, you're probably going to see 4.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the way it's setting up right now, there would be 4 SEC teams in the 12.
Right. So you talk about, earning your stripes or whatever. I mean, so it took the SEC a few years to be able to really kind of get in there. But once they got in there, it seemed like it took them a long time before they got out,
Well, in the 90s, it was basically Florida and Tennessee. I mean, those were the top
Florida
teams.
and Tennessee. The Florida-Tennessee game decided the East, which most likely decided the SEC.
Yeah, through the 90s.
Yes, in the 90s when you had guys like Worth and Manning going against each other.
Right.
Obviously, that power shifted over to the West in the 2000s, and I mean, just since the mid 2000s and on, it's moved over to the West, between whether it's been Alabama or LSU or
Auburn,
a couple of years, Auburn throws a hand grenade in there and says that they want to be in it.
Right.
And then you now have starting to shift at least a balancing act, a team in the East that can at least rival any of the Western teams with Georgia, throwing their name in the hat. They've been trying to do this for the last 5 years, and they've now seized control by winning the whole thing last year, not necessarily the SEC championship game, but won it when it really mattered in the national championship game.
Right.
So,
all right, so we'll move on to an SEC topic. So a couple of days ago, the October 8th schedule come out, and LSU versus Tennessee was announced as a noon Eastern time kickoff. And yesterday, a lot of the media and a ton of fans was throwing fits and complaining all day long, it seemed like, especially on Twitter. I don't know if you guys seen it or not, but complaining that the game was a noon game and that it should be a primetime game. But here's my thing. If you're a Tennessee fan, the truth is that Death Valley at 11 o'clock local time is a much easier game to play than Death Valley under the lights.
It is. And
are you fly with that or no fly?
I think I'll fly. I think, it's a easier matchup. Well, not really. It's not much of an easier matchup. It's a better time slot than they would have gotten going into Death Valley at night.
But Tennessee fans were throwing a fit yesterday.
And they're already coming off a bye week too, under a first year head coach too. So, it's the first noon game I think that Tennessee's had. They did try to get the 3:30 game, but they just went with, I think, Auburn and Georgia, I believe. In this regard, I think Tennessee fans should be happy because you take away the history of LSU at night. That's one of the wildest places. And that's one of the wildest places in the SEC, and they get crazy by that point.
But at 11 a.m., they're usually not that crazy yet.
No, and they're just waking up, and it changes it's still going to have a lot of hype to the game because LSU is playing a lot better. I still think if it had resulted in a night game, I still think it would have been difficult even for a team that is tested like Tennessee is, where they went on the road to Pittsburgh. I still think it would be a really hard game for them. So I believe I'm just going to go I guess it would be no fly, I guess. Would that be right?
No, you're going to fly. Say it is an easier game, right?
Yeah, it's an easier game. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I'll let it fly, yeah.
All right. Drink local BM. What do you think on this?
I do. I agree on letting it fly because, yeah, that crowd won't be awake until maybe the second half
Right.
of that game when they finally figure out where they are and what they're doing. But I was looking at the rest of the schedule here, and yeah, so Auburn, Georgia's at 2:30. CBS is doing their doubleheader that weekend where they have the afternoon game and then the night game. So Gary and now I've gone blank on the guy's name, but anyway,
Brad
Gary will
Nessler.
be at and Nessler, Nessler and Danielson will be at the Bama A&M game that night, and Auburn and Georgia will get the B team calling their game at 2:30. So if you really are looking at it, like where would this game where should this game have gone? The Kentucky South Carolina game is a SEC network at 6:30, I believe.
It is.
And so, I mean, you're looking at either that one, like replacing that SEC game and doing a night game there. But, ESPN, I think they wanted it on the main ESPN channel. So as soon as they come out of game day, they go right into it. So then you're replacing for ESPN that night and I've lost my place as to who's got the ESPN game at night, and I actually don't see one for 6 o'clock on the main ESPN channel. So because ABC has got Ohio State, Michigan State, which that's going to be a beatdown.
Right.
They're doing that just to spotlight the Big Ten, so the Big Ten stays happy. Because they've gone mostly to Fox, and then the Pac-12 After Dark being Stanford and Oregon State, and that's on the main ESPN.
I mean, the
channel.
point I was trying to make is playing it at Death Valley at night is a completely different animal.
Oh yeah, and I've been there. I've been to a game at Death Valley at night.
It's a different animal.
Now the crazy thing for me was that game was I was sitting at the very top of the stadium, so I didn't actually get to feel, like, you could tell that it was really loud, and you can kind of feel the stadium shake. But because I wasn't in the lower bowl, then it just I wasn't going to actually feel or hear the way that you're supposed to hear or feel it. So
right.
I didn't get the full on effect outside the fact that I could watch it take place right before my eyes.
Well, so everybody probably already knows my opinion. I come up with a question. I think that Tennessee actually got a pretty lucky time slot, if you ask me. They probably will catch LSU and the fans the whole first half, just not awake yet. And Tennessee's got such an offense, they'll probably be up 21-3, before the fans even really get in the game. So
right, and it's and I'm gonna kind of cut you off on that one. What you've got to be able to do if you're Tennessee is be able to put them away in the first half, because if you don't, just like in Auburn, weird stuff happens.
Right.
Like voodoo.
Hey,
yes.
Speaking of Auburn and weird stuff happening, because that's kind of my next topic. That's a weird stuff happening there last week, if you recall. So, there was huge talk if Auburn lost last week that their coach Brian Hairston would probably be fired. Speaking of last week and weird stuff happening, the guy tries to apparently reach for the goal line at the end and loses the ball. Auburn pounces on it in the end zone, and they win the game 17-14 last week. My question to you is this: is there another coach in the country that's on more of a hot seat than Brian Hairston?
Not at all. For one quarter on Saturday, we had some false hope. Auburn.
They was up 14-0.
They manhandled the line of scrimmage. They ran all over them. They got up 14-0.
Yeah.
And when they made adjustments, Harsin he didn't have no answers for it. And they didn't have the experienced quarterback, Finley, and Calzada's out for the year. But to struggle after the adjustments after the first quarter, to me, was really concerning, and I'll be honest with you, they gift wrapped this game. Missouri did. Auburn didn't win this game. Missouri basically just handed it to them.
They did.
Because they missed the chip shot field goal before the end of regulation. Then I think one of them was it a pick? Did Auburn throw a pick, I believe?
No, Auburn did.
No, it was Missouri threw a pick. And then I think, didn't Auburn miss a field goal or something?
They did right before half.
Right before half. And it was like watching the Three Stooges and I don't mean that to be mean. It was just, it was a dumpster fire.
Be mean.
It was just a dumpster fire. And from then on, after the second half, it was just like, who wants to win this game? Like, the ball was handed to each team, and, they said, here, take this game. No, you take it. No, this one, take it.
So are you implying that Hairston's on the hottest seat in the country?
I do. I think he's on the hot seat, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone by the bye week, to be honest. I think they play Georgia coming up. They got some really hard games coming up, and I just don't see them getting to bowl eligibility with the schedule that they got. So I'm going to say it flies that, Harsin's job is in jeopardy.
Well, they're 3-1 to begin with. Okay, so after the debacle that was last week, they really are 3-1. Now their schedule is a little tough. I'm not going to lie.
Well, they play the next three games. Here's the next three games before the bye: home against LSU, at Georgia, and at Ole Miss. And if you play like you did Saturday against Missouri,
you're not winning any.
You're not winning any of them games.
No. All right.
They only played one team.
The Birmingham guy who's an Auburn fan. What's your thought on this?
You really want to know?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, you're the Auburn fan of the bunch, so.
I am the Auburn fan. In fact, I am the Auburn grad. So
okay.
Yeah, makes it even more of a gut punch watching all this. But that is exactly the Auburn experience. If you were an Auburn fan and you watched that game, that you experienced Auburn right there. It is. The highs are extremely high and the lows are extremely low. And there's really nothing in the middle. I believe if you guys ever watch the SEC shorts.
Right.
Those little, yeah.
I love them. Yeah.
Watch the one on the Auburn experience. They have a roller coaster ride that they do. And it's hilarious because they nail what it is on the head. And it's just, we can go from being really good to being really bad really quick.
I mean, are y'all crying for Gus yet?
I was one that was wanting, if you're going to make the change, that you better be right with your change. You know what I'm saying? Because what my fear is that we'll end up like Tennessee and it'll take a decade to get out.
Right.
Or more. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I agree with you
the
on
way
that.
that it's going, it's looking more and more like we're digging a further, just a
Trench.
bigger and bigger hole
Right.
to try to get out of. And, you can be 3-9 or 3-9 one season like 2012 and then turn around and lose only the one game in the regular season in 2013 when you can experience the lowest of lows and the highest of highs in back-to-back seasons. But we're getting to a point where it's going to take multiple seasons to get out.
Well, another thing too, they've only played one team with a pulse, like I was getting ready to say, in Penn State, and they got dominated.
Right, got dominated on the line of scrimmage.
And, they haven't really played anybody up until, Penn State. And if Penn State does that, it makes me think, what's Georgia and these others going to be able to do?
Well, here's my thing.
I don't even.
Here's
I think
what I want.
I'm
Here's what
trying to
I
find
want to
something
discuss
else.
with this just for a minute. Why is it? I mean, this Hairston's only been there 16 games or something like that. I mean, this is just his second season, 4 games in, and it's been nothing but a mess since the day he got there and started. I mean, why is the fans, the players, the boosters,
That's the problem.
since
You
the
said
day
it.
he got there, it seems like nobody has been on board with this guy.
You said that, the third one, the boosters. Until the boosters get out of the hiring process and things in Auburn football, it's never going to be what Auburn football wants to be.
Correct.
The boosters have to lay off and let,
So, in order to do that, what you need somebody. So, Harsin can come in and demand to have that he needs full control of everything, but nobody's going to give him because he's not proven, right? He's
Then
not
why
proven.
hire him?
Well, here's the thing. Go back into that hiring process.
Yes, they went
What
through.
happened?
They went through a
What
few
happened?
people.
Yeah, there
They
you go.
did.
So the whole thing was a split decision right there, where you had the boosters that didn't want him, and you had an AD that kind of went rogue and went and got him, and now that AD is gone.
And that's, I mean, that right there tells you all you really need to know and why nobody's really been on board with him since the day he got there. Really.
Right. So now here's the thing. What he wanted to do as far as kind of his ego and how he runs things was something that Auburn needed. However, his recruiting style is recruiting like he's still in the MAC, and that his program is the best the best program within 500 miles, and it's not. You have to deal with the one team that's on the other side of the, with the legend that's on the other side of the state.
Right. Right.
And I mean, and this was something that I was discussing with somebody today. Auburn is still a top 15 to 20 program, like overall.
Well, there was talk, been talk this past week for Deion maybe being there, but we'll see.
Yeah. But like I was saying, they're still a top 15, of all, top 15 to 20 program all time. They could be top 10 if they would just get their act together.
I mean, 100%. I agree with that 100%.
They would be a top 10 overall. They are a blue blood of college football.
They are, and that's,
really believe it or not.
That is the reason that it is such a bad time right now to watch them, because they look like they are bottom 25, honestly.
Yes. Right. They look like it, but I mean, you go look at their record and kind of what they've done, an all-time record and everything. They're still a top, 10 to 15 program, or top 15 to 20 program, and they've been doing it with, in their history, they have the two greatest coaches to ever coach in college football of all time has been sitting on the other side of the state with Bear and with Nick Saban.
Right.
And they're still able to manage doing that.
And they still can win championships out of the blue with random coaches.
With random coaches, with random quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a guy that's, as good as Cam Newton, which, I mean, look, in all honesty, he was a high schooler playing with a bunch of elementary school students is what he was doing. He can sit there and go push himself around. But then you have a Nick Marshall who first year coming back to being a quarterback after playing DB for a couple of years, comes in and could barely hit the broadside of a barn throwing the ball the year that he was that they went to the national championship game. But, that offense was clicking. They were really good.
Yeah, I mean, even Terry Bowden had a great season there.
Right. He had Stan White and Pat Nix in back-to-back seasons and did really, really well coming off of, or actually while on probation. And then, after that, they had Damian Craig. They did okay with him. And then, of course, it kind of fell off at that point. And then you have Tommy Tuberville that can,
he had some really good years.
And I mean, even Brandon Cox wasn't the best of quarterbacks, but that team in 2005 was about a win or two away from being, or they were a few kicks away from being in the SEC championship game, and they were about another win away outside of that from really kind of knocking on the door of being in the national championship. Now, with USC and Texas being those top two programs, it's going to take a lot to knock them off. But because Auburn had been, left out the year before, if they were to have found a way to be undefeated, they would have been right in the middle of that stuff.
Well, where they currently are under Hairston is like they have dug a hole, and I believe it's going to take a little while to get out of unless you can hire some crazy big name just because of Auburn's history, and and it just takes off.
So when we go into talking about crazy big names, okay, so Deion Sanders, his name has popped up, and that guy can recruit.
He can.
Because he went
and
to
he
the
can
number
challenge
one,
Nick Saban.
Right.
In
which
recruiting.
is what you need. You need to be able to challenge Nick Saban on one side, and you need to be able to challenge Kirby Smart on the other.
Right.
So
yep,
you got to be able to take the big dogs out of your own state, and then go take the big dogs out of the state just to the east. You also need to be able to go down south and take the big dogs out of Florida.
Deion Sanders could probably do that.
And I think Deion could do that.
Yeah.
Now, could he, assemble a coaching staff that would be able to, put together a winning team? Probably. The issue will come back to what the root of the problem is. What would he do, and how does he fare and act with the Board of Trustees?
Exactly.
Now, would the Board of Trustees get out of the way? Would the Board of Trustees get out of the way and let him do his thing?
I don't know.
Or would they try to meddle and get in the middle of it?
Right. And if that happens, Deion will probably be unhappy, and
he will bolt immediately because he does not need that, any of that.
Nope.
He doesn't.
I agree with you 100% on that.
So the next name that I would I would love to see, and I wanted to see him before he got snatched up by another school, Lane Kiffin, because I would like to see what he could do at Auburn. Again, I don't think he has. To me, and I don't know much about like what he would do, but I feel like that he just wouldn't give a crap with the Borg. And so I don't know if his I don't care nature would go well, or if he could allow the board to do whatever it is that they want. He doesn't care and he'd still be able to win. I'm not really sure, but I think he could also recruit, and that he can put together a good offense. And this year, Ole Miss's defense is showing up. So he's got at least some form of way of getting defense players and defensive coaching staff. So, I think, I lean more for myself toward Lane. I would rather see him at Auburn than I would see any of the other ones, though Deion would be fun to watch. I think Lane would be somebody
It would
that
be
would
fun
be,
to watch with Deion. I
yeah.
will say that.
And
All
so
right,
does
so
Aflac
let's move
commercials.
on to our last topic. Our last topic is Washington Huskies. They've started out really strong this year. And you look at their schedule and, they miss a game or two with some of these top teams. And, is Washington a real contender to win the Pac-12?
I think so. They beat Michigan State, which is struggling right now. They've had a pretty easy slate playing Kent State and Portland State in the first couple of weeks, but they've dominated those games though. And the biggest thing is they're going to avoid the two heavyweights, USC and Utah, and they play teams such as Stanford, Arizona State, and Colorado. So the Huskies have a real big opportunity to finish the season with just one loss if they can beat Oregon. And if they beat Oregon, they could end up in the Pac-12 championship. A lot of that has to do with Michael Penix Jr. You know, and the fact that, they revamped the coaching staff, DeBoer. They had that situation with Lake last year where he left in the middle of the season. And I think this hire has paid real big dividends for the Huskies. So, and
Certainly helped Michael Penix Jr.
it did. And didn't Penix win, I think, Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week? Was it during the Michigan State week? So, and the biggest thing with Penix, he's completing 66% of his passes with only one interception. And he threw for 397 yards and 4 touchdowns against Michigan State, against a Michigan State defense that was supposed to be better. And they're not real good this year, defensively. So yeah, this will fly.
Yeah, I'm in contention that they are a contender. Their schedule, they miss a couple of games, like you said. That others, some of them have to play, and I think that they have shown enough so far. It's possible they could go 11-1 or maybe even 12-0 if they beat Oregon. So, John Roberts, what do you think on this one?
Right now it's up in the air, because while they are doing very well right now, they beat Michigan State, which is a team that people thought might be, I guess, okay with the current coaching staff, but apparently they have kind of fell off the wagon. Stanford's not really as good as anybody or as they've been in years past. So, they still could be okay. But I'd like to see what they do in games that, yes, they should win the games I'm about to name. But I have the feeling that one of these teams might sneak up and actually, knock them down. And I'm not talking about Oregon, because Oregon is the one that everybody's watching. But that Oregon State, Washington State, because that's at Washington State,
Right.
are the two games that I'd be really paying a close attention to. And then, I mean, look, they got UCLA this weekend. They got Cal in a couple weeks. The Arizona schools are not going to pose any sort of threat. Don't think Colorado will either, and that's a home game anyway. But at Cal, at Washington State, Oregon State's at home. Those are kind of games that I'd be kind of, and even though Washington should win these games, that's kind of the one that they might get, snake bit by a team that is not good.
Well, I mean, but even if they do lose one of those games, if they step up and beat Oregon,
they have an opportunity to go at least go to the Rose Bowl.
If they're 11-1, I mean, they're going to be in the Pac-12 championship game anyway.
Okay, so hold on. How does the Pac-12 do their championship this year?
I really don't know the answer to that.
So I think what they're doing is they're just taking the top two teams.
Oh, are they?
I don't think there's divisions. I think they got rid of divisions. So
they
could go
had been
11-1
doing
and still miss
divisions.
it. They had been doing divisions. They went north and south.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're doing divisions this year. I think they're just taking the top two teams, top two records.
Right.
And it may not be Washington, which is, they may go 11-1 and not make it. Because that one, because you get maybe USC and Utah.
I mean, it's possible, but I just think it's an interesting topic because everybody.
Yeah, you're right. I just looked that up. They're if the two teams are tied for first place, both teams will be in the championship game. So.
Question is what happens when two teams are tied for second place?
Yeah, that's the big one. And right now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 teams I think that are 1-0 in second place: UCLA, Washington, California, Oregon, and Utah.
Or what if there's 3 teams tied for the top spot?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little tricky.
Then what?
Yeah. We'd have to go look at their bylaws, go look at their rules.
Their tiebreakers,
how they do it.
Yeah.
What are their tiebreakers?
Right.
Which I think USC will win that top spot. It's everybody else that, I don't know. Oregon has shown flashes of coming out of it after losing to Georgia. California I don't think's that good. They should have beat Notre Dame. Utah is the wild card here because, even the loss to Florida, they still played a really good football game. So I think and to me, it's going to come down to the 3 ranked teams: Washington, Oregon, and Utah. And if UCLA gets it together, I think UCLA could make a run at it.
And it may just be whoever's ranked highest.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And USC's already got a jump hold on it already. They're 2-0 in the conference, so USC is pretty much living high right now.
Correct. So, but like I said, I mean, look, as of right now, yes, it flies. But do I believe it can happen later? That's a good question.
Right.
Because there are a couple of games, and like I said, it's teams that they should beat, but it may not be teams that they do beat. And then if they take one loss in the conference, that may knock them out of the conference championship. And if that knocks them out of the conference championship, that kind of knocks them out of everything else too.
Right.
So.
Oh, they have to at least be in the championship game to have a shot.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to wrap up our show tonight. John Roberts, Drink Local Beham, we appreciate you being on with us and coming on with some insight and some different insight, I guess I should say, and challenging us a little bit because you're definitely right on the. I knew that there was a chance that they were talking about it with the Pac-12, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that they were already doing it. I thought that was next year that they were doing that, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Challenge it.
Yeah. I honestly kind of thought that was last year or next year. I mean, that they were starting that. But anyway, so we appreciate you guys being on with us. John?
Yeah, you need to challenge us because Brad's behind in the standings right now. I had to get him. He's trying to fight back in the
Pick'ems?
picks.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so that'll be our next show. We'll probably post that on Friday, and we'll do our game day pick'ems.
Well, and what's crazy is this week there are some really, really, really good games, all over the board.
There's 10 or
From
12
noon,
games that are just really good games.
from noon till like 7:30, there's really good games all day.
Right. And we'll get into that. We'll start picking some games and looking
well,
at the
hey,
spreads.
before we go, how many of those games have been moved?
3 so
Because
far, I believe.
yeah, because we got Florida that's going to be played Sunday
Yeah.
at 11, right? Or at the 11 a.m. Central, 12 o'clock Eastern. I know. I think South Carolina, Kentucky. I think has been, or not South Carolina, Kentucky, but the South Carolina game has been moved to Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah, it's moved to Thursday.
Right. So there's a few of them that have been.
I want to say there was a UCF game that was moved to Sunday.
Yeah, UCF and I believe it was. Was it SMU?
Yeah,
And
I
then
think
there
it
was
is SMU.
South Florida got moved just in location. They went from being playing at Raymond James Stadium to being played at FAU, so on the other side of the state.
Okay. And all this is due to the Hurricane Ian coming through. So there's been a lot of changes to the scheduling for these games. So there's going to be some bad weather, and they're changing the times and days of these games. So anything else you guys want?